The message came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I remember the exact time because I had just gotten home from a 12-hour shift, still in my scrubs, standing in my kitchen with a glass of water I hadn't even taken a sip from yet. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up expecting a text from a coworker. Instead, it was from my mother. "You have been removed from the family group chat. Going forward, you are not to interfere in any family decisions. We are handling things without you from now on." I read it 3 times. Then I set the glass down, walked to my couch, and sat there in the dark for a long time. Here is the thing they forgot. My name is on the deed. Let me back up, because this story does not start at 11:47 on a Tuesday. This story starts 6 years earlier, when I was 24 years old, newly licensed as a registered nurse, and absolutely convinced that if I worked hard enough and gave enough, my family would eventually love me the way I needed to be loved. I grew up the oldest of 3 kids in a house where being responsible was not praised. It was expected. My younger sister, who is 4 years behind me, was the one who got the parties and the tears and the long conversations at the kitchen table. My brother, the youngest, got the leniency that comes with being the baby. I got the phone calls when the bills were late. I got the quiet expectation that I would handle it. Not because anyone asked directly, just because I was the one who showed up. My parents owned the house I grew up in outright. My grandmother had left it to them. But around the time I turned 23, they started talking about an investment property. My father had a friend who was selling a small 2-unit rental property in a decent part of town, and my parents were convinced it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The problem was they didn't have the down payment. They needed $45,000. They didn't ask me directly. That was never how it worked in my family. What happened instead was a series of conversations where my mother mentioned how stressful it was, how they had found the perfect property, how it was such a shame they couldn't move forward, how these opportunities didn't come around twice. My father would sigh at the dinner table. My sister would say nothing because she was 20 years old and had nothing to offer, and I would sit there feeling the invisible weight of the thing they weren't saying. I had $47,000 in savings. I had been working double shifts since the day I graduated, living on almost nothing, because I had this idea that financial security meant freedom. I didn't touch that money for vacations or clothes or a nicer apartment. I saved it like it was the one thing standing between me and disaster. When I finally said I would help with the down payment, my mother cried. Not the small, quiet kind of crying, the kind that fills a room. My father shook my hand, which was the most formal he had ever been with me, and said I was the rock of this family. My sister hugged me. At the time, that felt like enough. Because I was providing the down payment and had the better credit score, my name went on the mortgage alongside my parents'. The property attorney explained everything clearly. As a co-owner on the deed, I had equal rights to the property, including any decisions about selling, refinancing, or transferring ownership. My parents nodded. I signed. We went out to dinner afterward, and my father said he was proud of me. The understanding, never written down, never formally agreed upon in any document, was that once the rental income started coming in, they would pay me back gradually. Not all at once. I wasn't expecting that. Just a consistent amount each month. A gesture of good faith. A sign that the $45,000 I had handed over was a loan and not a gift I was too naive to call a gift. The tenants moved in 2 months later. The property generated $1,800 a month in rent, which after the mortgage payment left a profit of roughly $600. My parents managed the property. I was at the hospital 60 hours a week. The arrangement seemed to work. Except I never saw a single dollar. The first month, my mother said they were putting the profit back into a repair fund. The second month, there was a plumbing issue that cost more than expected. By the third month, I had stopped asking, not because I didn't notice, but because every time I brought it up, my mother's voice would get tight and my father would go quiet, and I could feel the conversation turning into something that would require me to either push harder or let it go. I always let it go. That pattern continued for 6 years. In those 6 years, I paid my own rent, my own student loans, my own car payment. I worked nights and weekends. I missed holidays and birthdays and a best friend's wedding because I was picking up extra shifts to cover the gap in my own budget, the same gap that $45,000 would have filled. I told myself the property was an investment in the family's future, not just my parents'. I told myself patience was a virtue. I told myself that when they were ready, they would make it right. What I did not know during those 6 years was that my parents had been making a different kind of plan entirely. My aunt, my mother's older sister, who has always been the kind of woman who says what she sees, called me on a Sunday afternoon in March. She asked if I had time to talk. I said yes. She went quiet for a second and then said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear the whole thing before you react." She told me that at a family dinner I had not been invited to, my parents had announced that they were planning to transfer the rental property entirely into my sister's name. My sister had recently gotten engaged, and my parents wanted to give her something meaningful as a wedding gift. The plan, as my aunt described it, was to have me sign a quitclaim deed, a document that would remove me from the title entirely and present it to me as a formality. They were going to tell me the property had become more of a burden than an asset, that the market wasn't right, that it made sense to simplify things. They had already spoken to a notary. I sat on my bedroom floor with the phone against my ear and did not say anything for almost a full minute. My aunt said, "I'm telling you this because what they're planning is not legal without your full and informed consent, and I don't think they're planning to give you the full picture." I thanked her. I hung up. And then, for the first time in 6 years, something in me that had been very carefully, very patiently waiting, finally stopped waiting. I did not call my mother. I did not send a text. I did not show up at their house or ask my sister what she knew. I had learned enough from years of watching those kinds of confrontations go sideways to know that emotion would not protect me. Documentation would. The next morning I called a real estate attorney. Not a friend, not a family acquaintance, an actual licensed attorney whose entire practice was property law. I explained the situation. She asked for the address of the property. She pulled the deed while I was on the phone. "Your name is listed as a co-owner," she said, "an equal 1/3 interest alongside your parents. Can they transfer ownership without me?" I asked. "Not legally," she said. "Not without your signature on a valid transfer document. And if anyone attempted to forge your signature or coerce you into signing under false pretenses, that would be a different matter entirely." I asked her what my options were. She explained several things that I wrote down carefully. First, because I was a co-owner, I had the right to request a formal accounting of all rental income generated by the property since the date of purchase. Second, if my co-owners were refusing to share that income, I had the right to file a partition action, essentially forcing a sale of the property and dividing the proceeds according to ownership share. Third, any attempt to pressure me into signing away my interest under false pretenses could constitute fraud. I asked her to represent me. 3 days later, my attorney sent a formal letter to my parents' address. It was not aggressive, it was precise. It acknowledged the co-ownership arrangement, requested a complete accounting of rental income from the date of purchase to present, and notified them that I was aware of the proposed transfer and would not be signing any quitclaim deed without independent legal review and fair compensation. I know the exact moment they received it because my phone started ringing within the hour. I did not answer. My mother called 4 times. My father called twice. My sister sent a text that said, "What is going on?" which told me everything I needed to know about how much she actually knew. The next message I received from my mother was the one I started this story with. "Removed from the family group chat. No longer to interfere. We are handling things without you." I screenshotted it immediately and forwarded it to my attorney. She replied within 20 minutes. "Perfect. Keep everything." Here is what the accounting eventually revealed. In 6 years, the rental property had generated a total net profit of $43,200 after mortgage payments and verified repair costs. My 1/3 share of that income was $14,400. Not 1 cent of it had been paid to me. Instead, the money had flowed into a joint account my parents shared with my sister, an account I had not known existed. My attorney filed the partition action in April. My parents hired their own attorney. For about 2 weeks, there were a series of phone calls between the two sides that I was not part of, which was honestly a relief. My parents' position, as relayed through their counsel, was that the down payment I provided had been a gift, that there was no written agreement about repayment or income sharing, and that I had never formally objected to the arrangement over the course of 6 years. My attorney's response was that a gift of $45,000 to co-purchase a property in which my name was placed on the deed was not a gift, it was a capital contribution, and 6 years of silence from a co-owner does not constitute consent to be excluded from income. Silence is not a signature. There was a mediation session in May. I sat across a table from my parents for the first time since all of this began. My mother looked at me with an expression I recognized, the one designed to make me feel like I was being unreasonable, like I was tearing the family apart over nothing. My father stared at the table. My sister was not there. My mother said, "We raised you, we gave you everything, this is how you repay us." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I looked at my attorney. She gave me a small nod. I said, "I'd like to proceed." The settlement was reached 3 weeks later. My parents agreed to buy out my 1/3 share of the property at current market value. The property had appreciated significantly in 6 years. My share came to $91,000. After deducting the $14,400 in unpaid rental income that was formally documented, the final buyout figure was $105,400. They wired the money in 2 installments over 30 days. On the day the final payment cleared, I sat at my kitchen table, the same kitchen where I had stood in my scrubs reading that message, and I did something I had not done in a very long time. I made myself a real breakfast. Eggs, toast, the good coffee I never bought because I was always watching the budget. I sat by the window and ate slowly and thought about what it felt like to be done. I want to be clear about something, because I think it matters. I did not do any of this out of hatred. I do not hate my parents. I do not even hate my sister, who I believe genuinely did not fully understand what was happening. What I did was protect myself. For 6 years, I had operated on the belief that love meant absorbing whatever the people around me needed without asking for anything in return. I believed that asking for what was fair made me selfish. I believed that keeping the peace was the same thing as being loved. It is not. The boundary I needed to draw was not emotional. It was legal, and that, more than anything, is what took me so long to understand. You cannot negotiate with someone who is not negotiating in good faith. You cannot have a fair conversation about money with people who have already decided the money is theirs. What you can do is document everything, find people who know the law, and trust that the same system that put your name on that deed will protect what your name means. My aunt came over the week after the final payment cleared. We sat on my back porch and she told me she had been watching my family dynamic for years, waiting for the moment I would finally stop absorbing and start responding. She said she was proud of me. I told her I wished I had called a lawyer 5 years earlier. She laughed and said, "You called one when you were ready. That's all any of us can do." I have not spoken to my mother or father since the mediation session. I have not responded to the 2 voicemails my mother left in the weeks after the settlement, both of which followed the same pattern, starting with accusations and ending with something that sounded almost like an apology but wasn't quite one. I have not explained myself to extended family members who have asked questions. I have not posted anything about it publicly, said anything at mutual gatherings, or tried to recruit anyone to my side. I simply moved forward. I used part of the settlement to pay off my student loans entirely. I put the rest into an account with my name on it, only my name, with a password I have never shared with anyone. I took a vacation for the first time in 4 years, a long weekend at the coast, by myself, where I walked on the beach in the mornings and read in the afternoons and thought about almost nothing at all. I still work 12-hour shifts. I still come home tired and stand in my kitchen drinking water before I have the energy to do anything else. But when my phone buzzes now, it is usually a coworker or a friend or my aunt. It is not a message telling me I have been removed from something. Because here is the thing about people who try to erase you. They can change the locks on whatever they want. They can revoke your access to every group chat and family dinner and holiday table they control. They can rewrite the story however they need to, credit whoever they choose, and believe whatever version of events lets them sleep at night. What they cannot do, without your signature, is take your name off the deed. That is not a metaphor. That is property law. And property law, it turns out, does not care how many times someone cried at a dinner table or called you the rock of the family. It cares about documentation. It cares about whose name is on the document. And for 6 years, without entirely understanding what that meant, I had kept my name exactly where it belonged. They changed what they could. I changed what mattered. and I did not need their permission to do it.